Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Pinball Arcade. So last time we did Black Knight, today we're doing 8-Ball Deluxe. So another pool table. I very much liked Big Shot as a pool table, and so pool table themed, but I wouldn't particularly just assume that one theme, which inherently you're going to probably have three or four over the decade pinball tables on the same theme. And kind of ironically, like Star Trek, I imagine there are three or four Star Trek pinball tables for just the vast number of Star Trek generations there have been.
Quit talking and start chalking.
Okay. So 8 Ball Deluxe is a 1980 table. We're still at 80 even. There are definitely a lot more tables from the 80s than the 70s, and way more than the one from the 60s. It's a classic pinball with a great contemporary Western pool hall theme designed by George Christian and Margaret Hudson. This may be the first mention, it almost certainly is the first mention of a female being a designer of a pinball table, which is weird to say the least. Um, there, there is definitely in the 80s and earlier instances of women working in jobs and just not getting the due and the credit that they deserve. But also by the time you hit like 85 to 90s, you start to see women pretty much not even having positions of power in jobs. Uh, Whereas earlier from that point, they did have positions of power, they just never got any credit.
8-Ball Deluxe.
Wouldn't have thought the game would have made sound effects uh, while we were in this history screen. Interesting, we can also tell that the audio has increased significantly compared to even Black Knight, which was also a 1980s table. The This table, the second in the 8-Ball trilogy of tables, was released by Bailey. It was re-released in 1982 as a limited edition and again in 1984. Now, releases in pinball probably mean a little bit more than they would compared to like a limited edition of a video game or a limited edition of a Blu-ray disc, because you would have had to set your assembly line up to build at least several hundred pinball tables of that exact same model. So to re-release something is to say that your manufacturing plant is not releasing a new table instead, and is instead meeting a very high demand where most pinball tables are never re-released, or as far as I know. So for something to be re-released twice means this table must have been very, very highly well regarded.
Quit talking and start chalking.
This well sought after game combines a beautiful art package with deceivingly tough gameplay to create a table some consider to be the best solid state of all time. This table talks to the player, instructing him over the din of the pool hall in the background to quit talking and start chalking. 8,250 units of this table were produced. So you can see that is very, very high numbers. Um, let's go ahead and we should probably look at the flyer first. Uh, Zoom in all the way and see what the flyer looks like. You have an interesting background on this flyer because it is actual like actors posed in a photo with then the pool table depicted. Um, Ironically, this flyer falls into the exact same problem that most virtual pinball emulators fall into, in that the table itself is being depicted at an angle, so you can't really see much of anything, where it would make a lot more sense to separate out the backboard and show that off, and then flatten from a top-down view
8-Ball Deluxe.
the look of the the table so you can actually see something. You can see on the back of this, there is quite a lot of ad copy being written, and on the back of the flyer, they do have it flattened so that you can actually see the play field. So the front is more just an eye catch more than anything else. These flyers are kind of unique in the fact that they are industry flyers and advertisements only for bars and arcades and things like that that would have the money to buy a pinball table. You would have to be a particularly rich person to ever have gotten your hand on a flyer like this if you were just a individual collector. See, for standard goals, it wants us to complete 1 through 7, score a corner pocket shot, score a bank shot, score an extra shot, extra ball, and score a special. So that seems to me like quite a pool-related amount of shots. It's kind of interesting. It's wise that it starts right here and kind of instead of starting like down here in the corner. That would be a terrible place for the camera to be centered by default. It looks like, again, this is a 3-ball only table.
Ball Deluxe.
So we've got no kickback still, but we do have a shoot again ball saver. So you don't always need kickbacks. It's sometimes nice to have them, but if you have a ball saver in general, that can be enough. You have each of the pool balls being depicted here in kind of a random assortment instead of racked. And then you see each of these balls are listed again, and they are done as drop targets with targets behind the drop targets, which means you're going to spend a significant amount of time trying to hit this angle on the side, and they have given you a side flipper on the left for that. Here you can have a cowboy girl playing billiards. Not particularly, I would say not even particularly drawn that well. Those jeans are pretty badly drawn, and the anatomy of the lady herself with the way her arm is and it is off, or her head is off. But also fully clothed, not particularly titillating. You have a little bit of cleavage here. I would argue, you might have an argument that the actual artist here, not particularly the best, but it almost implies something great, that the art can be a little bad on a pinball table, but the table can play really well, and that's the real focus. You have guns shooting off, which the previous billiard game did not include the Western gun theme. You have 3 equally separated bouncers. You have some drop down targets going all the way up to a final bank shot target. You have a lane that loops back up to just an A-B at top lane. I guess that's what you should call it. There seems to be a sinker hole maybe right here. So you hit this once to get the 8-ball, then you sink down there, and then or you overshoot it completely, which that's an interesting idea, to have a sinkhole score, or overshoot it and get back to the in lane, or maybe even sink a ball here and then get another ball and hit the ball that's sunk in the sinkhole to bounce it to the other area. That's probably a bad idea, though. There's also
quit talking and start chalking.
Plastic on top of this lane, which seems fairly unnecessary, unless it was just part of the production process that you couldn't have super thin plastic tops. I don't believe that's the case, because you have some thin parts over here. But yeah, it would be very rare that you would be able to bounce a ball upward or nudge a ball upward all the way into that lane. And they've done that over here also. And that just seems unnecessary. Then you have your launcher lane, which is basically nothing. And then the backboard has 7-digit cursors for 2 players, and the art is now drawn on the backboard instead of a posed picture. So they took the posed picture from the flyer and photo referenced it to have someone be the backboard artist. Honestly, if all other things were equal, that's a weird reflection, the way that's animated on that 8-ball. I would pretty much hire a female to be an artist for a backboard or for the art on a table. Ideally, you would want to score somebody, hire somebody based on their previous experience and skill. But if I was just hiring 2 new entry-level positions that have never painted anything before in my life, I would probably sexistly pick a female to do that work. But we have seen kind of a lack of real credits in pinball as far as the table history being mentioned, and in all actuality, I imagine that is in complete alignment where Williams, Bailey, Stern just had a policy of not crediting people who worked on their games. This was very true in video games also. Let's start playing. Like, it was very much the policy of, like, I believe Atari and Commodore 64 to not credit programmers, and there had to be a lot of pushback and fight.
3-ball, 7-ball,
It's gonna name every single ball you hit. Interesting.
6-ball,
See, I'm not sure if I would say that this is a weird camera angle, or if this table seems a little longer than normal. You can certainly do that. There's enough room on the top and bottom of a pinball table that you could make a table seem a little bit longer. See, ideally, I think that is where I'd want the camera to be, is to see as much table as possible. And theoretically, that is what you want always.
2-ball, 1-ball. Nice shot. Go for Deluxe.
So I think the bank shot on the left with the drop-down targets is your score multiplier. So hitting that every single time should be your first goal, everyone. You gotta be careful with that left target, because you can accidentally bump the ball with the upper left flipper and have that knock the ball directly into into the center.
1 more for Deluxe. 1 more for Deluxe.
So that was a corner pocket shot. Now we've done something to flash one of the bumpers. So this is the first game I've played for today, so we got some good luck there, but not great luck. Like that was a decent game for a first game, but
Chalk up.
This is a much more modern table,
7
not just because it's talking to you and has a
6 ball,
better setup
5 ball,
of the audio quality.
1 ball, 2 ball,
It seems to me like we are never going to see a pinball table that had like a record player or something along that line.
4
I
ball,
could understand in not having a record player, come to think of it, or anything that would have had to use a needle. The nudging would have just caused the record player to scratch whatever record. Like, and it would have been a tiny record of just like a few minutes or seconds of sound. And having that much equipment, having to have like a phono preamp and a record player and change the needles and all of that would be kind of crazy. You could potentially have a cassette player, but it just wouldn't be fast enough, or an 8-track player or something.
Get the 3 ball, side pocket.
But yeah,
Get the C.
it does seem like the shoot again does not light up, so you don't actually have a ball saver in this game. So we're still kind of not at that point.
Go for 3 ball. Shoot for 8 ball.
So if I can now just get the up the left lane, which I don't think I can get an angle with that upper left flipper down at that angle. So only the lower left flipper or
Make the Deluxe.
only the left flipper or a random shot will hit the 8-ball rail. So it feels like what you have to do is you have to hit all the solids, then the 8-ball, then all the stripes. Unlike Hot Shot though, this is hitting the different balls is not just the only focus. This is basically taking the concept of hitting pool tables and expanding on it to have much more modern and much more varied shots. And while you probably wouldn't succeed very well playing this table if you couldn't hit those drop targets on the right, you're not completely out of luck. There's plenty of other things to do, and bumpers arguably are more exciting if you don't know what you're doing.
Make the C.
You have to be careful with the left trigger again because you.
8 ball corner pocket. Make the 8 ball corner pocket.
They clearly are playing 8-ball here because they're calling a shot specifically around the 8-ball. Where, generally speaking, when you're playing straight pull, you don't have to call the 8-ball as your final shot. And generally, people playing straight pull don't even have to call any shots, depending on just who you're playing with. There's a certain level to certainly talk about that billiards, much like pinball, is mostly for kids. Like you're not gonna walk into a random arcade and see too many professional pool tables going on competing in professional tournaments. It is 99% of the time going to be little kids that just want to bounce a pool table pinball around and see flashing lights. Same is fairly true with billiards, is that most of the people that are playing billiards are going to play with the on easy mode, as it were, and not try to do anything crazy, or crazy bank shots, crazy trick shots, or run the table where you play 5 games and potentially by the second or third move you've cleared the entire table because you're just that good of a shot. That's one of the things that makes watching like professional billiards fairly boring, is the fact that they are just so good at it that they will maybe only make 2 or 3 mistakes, if that many, per round. There we saw another kind of now iconic instance of the ball draining immediately. But this table is much better at that. It's fairly difficult for this ball to from launch go down the exact center because of the bumpers in the way. The angles of that bumper on the right is not in a bad position. The out lanes aren't terrible. This is, yeah, a really good table. Although, arguably, it would be nice if there was a little bit more background music, calming, maybe a little bit more calming music. I guess pinball never really embraced the idea of calming, like the style of calming background ambient video game music that a lot of games have. It's all flash and excitement. Yeah. If pinball tables were invented today, they would clearly be blamed for the increase of ADHD, for just how much flashing nonsense happens. And if anything, I guess maybe all the flashing nonsense that happens on pinball tables might be an argument against the false perception that ADHD is increasing. Diagnosis of ADHD and ADD has increased significantly because they've widened the definition and made it easier and more acceptable to diagnose people with that. Plus, self-diagnosis is kind of through the roof. That shot on the left lane is kind of an interesting example of something you want in failure, because there's a rollover target. So if you go right over the rollover target, then lose momentum and fall back down, you've rolled over the target twice. That being said, you still probably don't want that, because you're going to end up you're still going to probably end up draining down the center, or at least being in a bad position you don't want to be in. This is a table that would almost certainly benefit from having a lane, because there are definitely some shots that you can only hit with the left side, and there are definitely some shots that you can only hit with the right side. So if there was one loop shot that you could get good at to flip the ball to the other side, that would be nice. Otherwise, you're left to being able to cradle the ball, which I'm clearly not that good at. Because the cradle of the ball, you basically have to get it to lose all momentum, like that. And it usually takes a flip. And then, depending on how the flingers, bumpers are above you, you'll kind of want to do that. But see how that did not work because you then have to once again kind of flip to keep its momentum down, otherwise it will just bounce up. And that's definitely not a trick. It's a trick that if you want to be a pro at pinball, you should do, but it's not really a trick you want to do, because it is, or I want to do particularly, because it just kills momentum, and it's slow, and it is very much the focus around precise shots and actually trying to lock something, or I would prefer to just keep the game going. Like, it's much more fun. In a funny way, there's kind of a zen-ness to the way I like to play pinball, in that I kind of am not interested in score. I'm not interested in getting specials. I'm just interested in seeing something happen and having fun. The multiplier shot, though, does bounce back to the center lane, so maybe it would have been nicer if there was a spinner there instead of drop-down targets. It's the bumper directly in the center lane is a bit of a problem, so if there was a peg in the middle so it didn't at least return the ball with more momentum, that would probably be nice. Or you could put a drop-down target down the center, or not a drop-down target, just a target in general down the center of the lowest bumper. I imagine you're also in a situation where you could just constantly fiddle with the design of a pinball table, constantly add more things. I'm sure almost every pinball company gave a specific budget of items and things that could be in a table. Although a lot of it really was just an arms race to have as much randomness and how much try to have as much randomness and as much flash as possible. Money was, I'm sure, still an object, but it may not have been a great concern. You definitely were never designing pinball tables for a scale of selling them in homes, so if it was $200 or $300 more expensive because you added a few more targets, I don't think too many people would have complained. But I also imagine in the limited editions and re-releases of this table, they didn't probably change anything, because that would probably irritate people. Like, the only thing I could imagine you could do for like the deluxe version versus the non-deluxe version of this would be to add maybe better art or lights, but even changing the art might be a little too offensive. But you could definitely add a two-player mode if the game originally did not have a two-player mode. This definitely feels like a table I can favorite and put back on, come back and play later, because there's definitely feels like enough here.
Sink the 7.
Yeah, this definitely feels like a table that I don't want to put down, and I don't want to stop playing. It's kind of weird how, while it does talk while you're playing, it says shorter and more consistent things. And it's also not just making the sound effects of like Gorgar, it's actually telling you what to do and trying to help you play the game, which that is definitely useful. I could definitely see a argument towards, as the tables get more complicated, visual audio feedback is probably going to become more and more helpful. Not that every single game had that by any means, and compared to video games, some audio feedback is acceptable, but if I was playing a video game that was literally just tutorializing me and telling me to do certain things throughout the entire gameplay of that game, I would find that incredibly annoying. I'm noticing that specifically in this so now let's hit the 8 ball. Yeah. Yep. It's a high scoring game. It's a quick lose game. Probably could turn off the heads up display. And for a table like this, it's not gonna change too much. You are gonna run into scenarios where when you are ready to hit the 8 ball, it's gonna just tell you to shoot the 8 ball and nothing else. Prematurely hitting the 8 ball doesn't work, so you have to be fairly linear about your guess there. I'm assuming the flashing bumper is a good thing. Getting a bank shot is nice. But yeah, I'm doing fairly terribly as far as getting the score multiplier shots in that middle left lane.
Get the 5 ball. 5 ball.
So now would be the time to hit the 8 ball.
Nice shot. Get the Deluxe.
So now I have no idea what I'm shooting for. I guess I'm shooting for the drop targets or the hit targets in the back.
Go for C.
It seems like those top lanes toggle a bonus,
Get the C.
and it's saying C as if
Go for C.
it had been misprogrammed into like hexadecimal, and or it was using a chip specifically designed to speak out numbers, which those would have existed
Shoot for C.
when it shouldn't be saying C, it should be saying the decimal number. And it seems like it reset everything, unfortunately.
Shoot for C. 7 ball.
So you're having like one good run there. Got me to the second row. But to score a bank shot, shoot the bank shot target way up there with the bank shot lane, which I've done terrible at. So it will give you 50,000 is special and toggle lit award. The multiplayer drop targets are reset when the ball is drained. Complete the rollover. So that's one thing. There's one extra ball and several specials available on this table. An extra ball is awarded when the rollover here is completed 7 times. So while there is a heavy focus to hit the ball to the right, you actually have to get fairly good at getting those upper lanes on the left too, which that's a nice balance certainly, and a sign of a good table. Oh, look in the background too. You can see a wall. Like this table is near the corner of a wall. Special can be earned by completing the deluxe spot targets, which were the ones I suppose behind the drop downs. When special is lit here, outlanes when special is lit, corner pocket, saucer when special is lit. I definitely have some different terminology than what I imagine the official terminology is for a lot of pinball tables. And that definitely comes from the fact that most people, including myself, when playing pinball, would just see the table. It's not like we're going to have instructions or even read any text written on them, if there was text on there, to explain what things are what. People, of course, have come to a common vernacular for plungers, flippers, the ball itself, the buttons, the cabinet, the backboard, things like that are probably not disputed. But yeah, a target versus a drop-down target can easily be confused. A flinger versus a rubber band versus a bumper can be confused. It seems like when special's lit, almost everything just gives you more points, which that's fair. That makes sense. Totally.
Quit talking and start chalking.
Special's worth 1 credit. Completing deluxe on the back glass scores a special worth 3 credits. A letter in deluxe is awarded each time the deluxe spot targets are completed. Oh, so if you hit those targets 6 times, you could get 3 credits. Interesting. Special can be earned by completing the deluxe spot targets. Okay. So, yeah. These 3 goals seem to be all designed around the exact same thing. Let's see what the operator mode here will do.
8-ball deluxe, 3-ball.
Interesting. When I just clicked on the manual button, this time it popped up a web page on my second monitor. Interesting. Unfortunately, that web page did not link to an actual web page. It's ipdb.org, which I assume would be the Internet Pinball Database. And I don't know if perhaps this is just a case of the Internet Pinball Database not working at the moment, or not working at all. Let's see. So you could change to single light out versus both lights out. Completing A, B, C, D drops 2 targets. I don't even know what a C and D would have been in here. Left lane special first sequence versus next sequence. That sounds harder. Completing 8-ball special the 3rd time, 2nd and 3rd time. That seems easier. Saucer score is bonus with multiplier versus rack and bonus. Deluxe lit remembered after 8 ball. Yes, that means sounds like that would be easier. Let's see. Playfield Deluxe Advanced Backbox when specials lit or always. Seems like this table is fairly easy by default and you can make it harder, which that's where maybe a limited edition might come into play, is that you might add more features to make the game more hard instead of just adding more players. But I imagine a limited edition is just a re-release of what had already been built and not putting any other thoughts to it. Match off versus match on. Balls per game can go as low as 2 and as high as 5. I guess there aren't too many tables out there that could give you more than 5. Credits would just be a button to give you credits, which don't matter because you have effectively infinite credits anyways. And then hitting back takes forever to load because you're basically loading the RAM, I think, more than anything anyways. I'll turn on ball control just because. Let's play one game here and see if we just had a little bit more time to account for crazy drainouts, would that help? Or if we just had ball control to accommodate for crazy drainouts, would that help? That being said, I'm not sure if I drain quickly down the center lane, I would be able to control the ball and bring it back into play anyways.
Shoot for bank shot.
Yeah, I still don't really know what the C and D's would be in this layout. Gotta keep my eyes on the balls too. Going up that left outer lane 7 times seems a little crazy. Right. So there's an out lane.
Nice, thanks.
And we'll just seemingly, as long as you're up there, you can just kind of get almost a super high score.
6 ball. Shoot for 8 ball.
There's 8 ball. Bank shot. Let's go ahead and
shoot for B.
Sink down that, and that lights both of them back up.
Nice bank shot.
And let's see. If we were to hit all of this, that's one Deluxe lit up, and I guess that explains why it says Deluxe there. And so I assume that wouldn't have existed in the non-Deluxe edition. So perhaps this was a table that people got really good at, which that makes sense, certainly. We heard a loud sound effect, a clacking sound, when I spelled Deluxe, because it gave me a new credit and an extra ball. Shoot again, it's now lit.
Make the Deluxe.
Yeah, you'd have to get really good at this though to hit all of these. if you don't have ball control. Now all of Deluxe
Nice shot.
is lit up. And they made the clacking sound again. Now, there is a slight difference
Two ball, one ball,
between what
4, 5, 6, 7 ball.
what shoot again means later on, because shoot again eventually on some tables clearly means
C.
that you're going to continue your multiplier and you're going to continue playing.
Nice bank shot.
There's another. We're up to like seven free credits that we've earned. Maybe it is right when it says shoot to C. Maybe I just don't know where the C is, and it isn't a hexadecimal thing.
Make the Deluxe.
I've yet to see. Okay, now we're up to 8.
For Deluxe. Go for C.
Yeah, I don't see where
Nice
C
shot.
is. I don't see where 8 is.
Make the C. Make the C.
Yeah. Where would C be?
Shoot for C.
And I just don't have enough momentum to get past that sync target if that was C.
Shoot for C.
Ah, so C must be then
The C.
somewhere here. Must be the in lane. And you can just get all kinds of crazy free games, although not. Is the in lane, yeah, the in lanes are C and D. Okay, so what am I shooting for now? As I'm spelling
For Deluxe.
okay.
One more for Deluxe.
Okay, so
Get the Deluxe. Get the Deluxe.
you get the
You got
Deluxe.
the Deluxe. Nice shot.
So what are you hitting for now? Like, seriously, what gets you up to past the 8 ball? Where's the 9 ball in this whole setup?
Get the B.
Get the B.
Nice bank shot.
It's almost as if those numbers are it's almost as if the 9 through 15 are just fake shots and they never light up. Either that or there's just no way to get the stripes.
Get the A.
We have like all 3 bumpers now flickering. Would hitting the bumpers a lot potentially line up something? I'm just waiting for the next instruction.
Nice bank shot. Shoot for C.
Yeah, it seems like, to me, at this level, you've maxed out all you can do. And it might just be a case where the 15, the stripes are just for player 2, which would mean that
3 ball. 5 ball. 6, 7, 4 ball.
that would mean that those secondary lights
Nice shot.
get used considerably less.
Go for C.
Yeah, unless I locked myself into some kind of mode, it does seem like this is just a 2-player game. Interesting. So let's just let the ball drain out, because I can't sit here and control the magnet forever. Plus, getting 8 million by cheating is not going to get you anywhere.
Get the B.
Just go ahead and let that completely drain out. You would want to, at the very least, alternate whether you're playing as solids or stripes. But for simplicity's sake, they've just decided not to do that. And you can see in the attract section, the other bulbs do light up. What this really means is that every time you went to service this, you would probably want to replace the one bulb, if it burned out, with the bulb for the 9 ball, or just toggle all the bulbs on a regular basis, which that's kind of a waste of time. Let's go and turn off everything and play one more game. I know we're going long here. So this time I'm going to play a 2-player game. That way we can confirm our suspicions that the stripes are just for the second player. It's frankly more consideration than a lot of video games these days would have given to focus on this second player experience, or have a slightly different second player experience. Alright, so now player 2, everything gets reset, and that's the, yeah, it does say you are the stripes now, and you can see the stripes are lit up. Also, the second player's camera was different. Interesting. It's interesting that it memorizes your settings visually, but not between tables, I imagine.
4 ball. Sink the 8 ball. Make the 8 ball corner pocket.
If this was an electromechanical table, it would not be able to really memorize what progress you had made, and it would just continue, which is a different type of gameplay, certainly. because effectively the first player could set up a whole bunch of shots for the second player and have the second player in a very good position.
Get the 8-ball corner pocket.
Notice how it just pulled down all those drop targets for the first player. It is a better experience, certainly, to have solid-state machines and circuitry. Obviously. Like, the older technology was necessary and established, was a great stepping stone, but there's really no...
Nice shot. Shoot for Deluxe.
There was really no good argument to stick to the old technology. And we really don't have much new technology, as it were.
One more for Deluxe. One more
So,
for Deluxe.
like, building a pinball table today would be only slightly more efficient than building a table in the 80s.
Rack 'em up.
So we got a Deluxe there.
Go for C.
Actually, I'm just playing now again, and it's been an hour. Yeah, this is a table I definitely like. I'm not feeling any of the frustration I've felt with some of the other tables.
9-ball.
Yeah, those second player lights are going to get used considerably less. Although arguably, it might be a case that it doesn't really matter because, well, it doesn't matter in the digital version at all, but the attract lights and the fact that the lights are flashing on and off probably wear them out more than anything that happens during gameplay. And I'm not sure if there probably was some special technology, I would guess, in the bulbs that were being used for 80s tables that made them kind of run hot always, so they would just warm up and never really cool down. And it's the heating up and shrinking because they're cooling, thermal expansion, thermal constriction, that tends to damage electronics anyways. And we have like a Edison light bulb, for instance, that's been going for 100 years. It's just incredibly dim and incredibly consistent. So because of the attract mode, maybe the bulbs last about the same anyways. And they almost certainly had to be special kind of flash bulbs designed to specifically flash on and off more than a normal bulb would. Alright, well, yeah. It's weird that it jumps you back to the top here. But, yeah. We are 2 games into the 80s era, and and both of them I've enjoyed quite thoroughly. Now, if anything, I would say Black Knight, historically important, but kind of a weird table. So we may be in for a bit of a groaner here with whatever this table is, but because it doesn't have a pro mode. But then this one does have a pro mode, and if that is any indication, then this Flight 2000 might be pretty good, and this one might be pretty good, or maybe not. But even if that wasn't the case, I'm fairly certain Black Hole is recognizable, even though it too doesn't have a pro mode. Anyways, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.